So welcome, Megan and Chan Mary, and thanks for coming, Braulio. Let's talk about the plan today. This is our very last webinar of the course. So after this, you're basically just doing a little work and taking the big final. So let me share my screen. Okay, so the plan today is we will, I'll go over any questions you might have. And then after that, we'll get into chapter 13, which is the last chapter. And it's a short chapter because we're only doing some of the original chapter. Again, I customized the book, so it only has what we do. So you'll notice it is a short chapter. And that is ANOVA. I'll often it stands for analysis of variance, but we won't understand why. More importantly is we'll understand what it's used for and how to conduct a hypothesis test using ANOVA. So we will look at what ANOVA is about. We'll look at the requirements to be able to use ANOVA, which are a lot deeper than any of the other statistical tests we've done before. So that's just a warning. We'll do some examples and then after that, we're going to review for the final exam. So your final exam is next week, and you have choices. You can do it Sunday, you can do it Tuesday, or you can do it Wednesday of next week. So those are the choices, and that's it. So again, today is the very last webinar for the entire quarter. And unlike other classes, I've been doing these webinars for 15 years. A lot of faculty, this is the first time since COVID is the first start for them of doing webinars. But so you're probably used to webinars now. So it's not like other years where this was the only one in existence, basically. So this is the plan. Let me ask you, are there any questions? Any questions at all for this, whatever you might have? And again, feel free to ask. Okay, if you don't have any questions, then I'll get into ANOVA. And let me start out by a good reminder, which is a nice final exam review anyway. And let's see if you could tell me the different statistical tests we've had. Testing for this or that or that. What have we already tested for in terms of hypothesis tests? There's a lot of them.
Like t-tests.
Okay, t-tests for what?
Means.
Okay, so means, be more specific. Because, for example, on the calculator, there's more than one of those. There's actually 3, if I remember right. So do you remember which ones? Okay, so can you remember? Okay, maybe we'll go in order. So do you remember what chapter 9 went through? What tests? I know it's been a little while. All right, maybe that didn't work. Okay, so maybe I'll remind you. So we've had a lot of hypothesis tests. We started with a test to see whether a mean was bigger than something, less than something, or not equal to something. Then we looked to see whether a proportion was bigger than something, less than something, or not equal to something. So that was chapter 9. And then we moved on to chapter 10, and that was to compare two proportions. And then to compare two means, one was to compare two independent means, and the other was to compare two dependent means. Then we went into chapter 11, and we had a hypothesis test for goodness of fit, chi-squared goodness of fit. We had the chi-squared test for independence. We had the chi-squared test for homogeneity. And then we went into chapter 12, and we had the t-test, actually, another t-test for correlation to see if the correlation was non-zero. What haven't we learned how to do yet? And there's a bunch, and we're going to do one of them today. And the rest, I'll tell you that you have to take another stats class. What don't we know how to test for yet? Any thoughts? Better to guess than not guess?
Like association or?
Well, association, we did that with a chi-squared test for independence. Talks about association. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And also regression. Correlation is association, right?
Oh, prediction.
That's also regression. That's also regression is a prediction, right? Because you use a regression line to make a prediction. Okay, good ideas though. And we definitely, those are important tests, but those happened with regression analysis, chapter 12, which was last week. So maybe I'll give you a hint. So remember chapter 9, we looked at chapter 9, we looked at a single population mean to see whether it was bigger than a number. Chapter 10, we looked at two different means to compare the two means. How can you expand on that?
Comparing three means.
Yeah, comparing
or
three
more.
means or more, exactly. So a lot of times you want to compare multiple different groups to see if they all have the same mean, or maybe they're not all the same. Does that make sense? Okay, and that's what we're doing today, is we're looking at a comparison where we have multiple means, usually more than two. So for example, if you wanted to find out, I don't know, how about is the average GPA? Is it the same no matter what state you're in? Okay, then you're going to compare 50 different means, and you're not going to be able to do that with any tests that we've already had because we don't have that yet. We don't know how to compare 50 different means, but the good news is we're about to get it. So let me introduce what this is. In fact, let's make it a little bigger. And it is called analysis of variance. So I kind of capitalized in an interesting way because don't shoot the messenger, but this is the way everyone does it, is we call it ANOVA. So I capitalize the A, N, O, V, and A. So it's called ANOVA. In fact, maybe I'll write ANOVA. And the title analysis of variance is really confusing because it really is not a hypothesis test to see anything about variance. So just deal with it. It's called it. I'm not the one that named it, but this is what it's named. And it tests to see if several means are all equal or not. Okay, so we're not looking at comparing two means. Now we're comparing many means. Okay, it could be 50 different means. It could be 3 different means. You could actually do it with 2 means, but there's no reason to because we already have our test for 2 means. And it's called ANOVA. And there's a null and alternative hypothesis, and you're used to that. Okay, the null hypothesis is kind of similar to the null hypothesis when we tested for two different means. I don't know if you remember, that was mu1 equals mu2. Well, now we might have four different means. Mu1 equals mu2 equals mu3 equals mu4. You could have 50 of them, and you're certainly not going to write them all out. It would take all day. But you just say mu1 equals mu2 equals ... equals mu50. Any questions on understanding what the hypothesis, the null hypothesis, states? Any questions on that? All right. So again, you're kind of having a debate, right? The other guy is saying all the means are the same. So if you're going to debate, what is the other side of the argument besides all the means are the same? Does it mean that all the means are different? What do you think? So what do y'all think? Does it mean that?
No. No. Would it mean that at least one is different or doesn't fit the pattern or doesn't fit in?
Yeah, you could do at least one, but it's what does doesn't fit the pattern mean? So I think easier, and this is why I've written it out, is at least two of the populations differ. Population means differ from each other. So the idea, like for example, the GPA thing, maybe California and New York are exactly the same GPA, but Arizona might be different, and Arizona and California are different, and maybe all the others are the same, or maybe half are the same and half are, half are 3.1 and the other half are 2.8. Okay, but then you could say that there's two of them that are different from each other. Okay, so be careful about thinking that the other side of the argument of they're all the same is that they're all different, because they don't all have to be different for the alternative hypothesis to be true or for the null hypothesis to be false. All you have to have is that there are two of them that are different from each other, whereas the rest of them could all be the same as the first, all the same as the second, maybe half each. But as long as two of them are different from each other, then they're all different. Any questions at all about analysis of variance, null and alternative hypotheses? Any questions? Okay. It turns out that this is used everywhere, even though it doesn't feel like that would be the big test. But when I read a lot of literature and stuff, read journal articles I'm talking about, I would say half of them, half of the hypothesis tests they've got use ANOVA. So that's just a note, is that this is a big deal. Even though it seems like just some kind of niche thing, ANOVA is a major hypothesis test that is used in research. I will let you know, again, there's a reason why it's called analysis of variance, and it's a reason we will not get into in this class. And that is when you do the full mathematics of testing to see if the means are different, okay, or if they're all the same or if two of them different from each other, it turns out that you're going to use variance in a big way, but you're just going to like touch a calculator and let it happen and not have to worry about it. Sound fair? I figure I should note why is it called variance, analysis of variance. And it's that deep math that we don't do. Okay, any questions on the idea? All right, now comes the really hard part. And one of the things about when I say something's really hard, what does that mean that you're responsible for? Do y'all know? You're being quiet. Remember? So if it's really hard,
then we'll use the calculator.
yeah, but that's
We
you.
don't.
This one's different. So then you need to take another statistics class. Sound fair? But I want to give you that big heads up is that there are some major requirements of ANOVA that are really hard to show that you actually got. Okay. And let me go through the requirements. So the requirements are as follows. Let me make them a little bigger. So first, all sampling distributions are approximately normal. All right. Well, one thing we know is that if all the sample sizes are over 30, you're in good shape. If not, we don't know how to decide if it's normal or not. So that's a biggie. Again, what I want you to do is know that that's a requirement to be able to use ANOVA. You're not responsible for deciding if it's met or not. Another one that we haven't had before is that all population standard deviations are equal to each other. That's a tough requirement. Okay. And to decide whether the standard deviations are equal, or at least close enough to being equal is good enough usually, you need advanced statistics, which we're not going to do. Okay, so that's another new one, and that is the standard deviations have to be the same. So if you're doing GPAs of all 50 states, you don't know how to tell if the standard deviation in Georgia is the same as the standard deviation in Alaska, okay, which is the same as everywhere else. So we're not going to show that they're equal. We're just going to assume they're equal, okay? But in the real world, you have more work to do. So I want to give you the big heads up that just because you think you know how to use ANOVA doesn't mean you really know yet, because there's a lot of details. Another one, which is this is a requirement for everything we do in the entire class, basically, and that is simple random sampling, or at least no bias. You have a representative sample. Okay, if you ever have a sample that has inherent bias, you shouldn't do any statistics. Okay, that's just the way to go. Okay, you just don't go there. So you never want to use convenience sampling. You never want to have obvious bias. You want to have a nice sampling technique that prevents much of the bias. Okay, another one is the samples must be independent of each other. Okay, so again, if we were looking at GPAs for students in different states, independence is probably not a big deal because you're just going to survey a bunch of people from each state, and you're not going to find paired people or anything like that. But here's the thing you're not able to do when you're doing ANOVA. You're not able to do a survey question where you're asking, say, 40 people, 5 different survey questions that are all quantitative to see if the answers are different from each other, because then that would be dependent. Because if everyone is answering many questions and you're comparing the answers, then you have dependent samples. And if you have dependent samples, you can do statistics. We don't do that in this class. Okay. And then finally is the samples were consistently taken. That one is easy if you have good planning skills. Okay, so let me give you that kind of the asking students in all the different states. Okay, if you were going to do that survey, you wouldn't do it by yourself. Okay, way too hard. You'd have to travel to all 50 states, go survey in each state. It would take forever. Instead, what you do is you'd pay people in each state to do the survey. And you have different people doing the survey in California then doing it in Nebraska, then doing it in Ohio, etc. And you have to make sure that all of the surveys are conducted in the same manner. Okay, so the survey question has to be the same for everyone. The way you deal with questions on the question has to be the same. Anyone know how in the real world how to handle that? How it's done? I was actually a part of that in one of my first jobs when I was 11 years old. I was one of those people doing the surveys. Anyone know how to handle that? If anyone wants to be a manager, you need to know these kind of things. It's kind of a quiet group. Okay, let me mention it then. You have a meeting. So you have a meeting before you even do the survey. And especially if you're doing it all the states, you're probably going to have it on Zoom because it's too expensive to bring everyone to the same place in the same room. And you're going to talk about the kind of the rules of the survey and how the survey is to be conducted, et cetera, and make sure that everyone who's conducting the survey is doing it in the same way. And that is how you would conduct a proper survey if you're comparing in many places, for example. Make sure that their samples are all consistently taken. Any questions on any of the requirements for ANOVA? Any questions? It's definitely the most number of requirements that we've had. Okay. And we'll have because we're not having any more. So it tops the requirements. And just looking through these, I don't want to make light of any of them. Okay. They're all pretty rough. Okay.
Larry,
Yeah.
if all population standard deviations are equal, does that mean the standard error is 0? Is it related at all?
The standard error would be 0 if the standard deviation is 0. So the standard error doesn't look at each of the states, for example, and look at their means and conduct it's different. So the standard error is a standard deviation over the square root of n.
Okay, right? Got it. Yeah. Okay, so I remember the formula.
So for the GPA example, the standard deviation of GPA, I'm just making it up, might be, I don't know, 0.6. Okay, I have no idea what it really is, but let's say the standard deviation was 0.6. And let's say you surveyed 100 people. Mm-hmm. Then the standard error would be 0.6 over the square root of 100. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it's good that you asked, because any excuse to remind you of things like standard error, because you're responsible for everything on the final, then it's good to review. So everything's good to review. But what it does mean is the standard, if your sample sizes were all equal, the standard errors would all be equal. But the sample sizes don't have to all be equal. So even if the standard deviations are all equal, the standard errors may not be. Because, so not only not equal 0, but they may not equal to each other. Because, for example, you might want to ask more people in California than you do in Kansas, because California is a much bigger state in population. So then you would have a smaller standard error for California than you do for Kansas. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So very important understanding standard error, because at least it'll come up in some way on the final. Just let you know that. So it can't hurt to ask questions about it. Yeah. So it just means the standard deviations are all equal. And again, that's a hard thing to decide on. A lot of times, basically, you need other tests. And we can't do that in this class because today's our last day. We don't have time. Okay, other questions? Other questions? Okay, if there's no more questions, I think the best way to do this is by example. So I just made up an example. Okay, so suppose that a study was done to analyze the racial differences for the distance in miles that people live from the nearest public library. Okay, so for example, I live 2 miles from the nearest public library. I don't know what you all live, but it's 2 miles. Okay, the data from the study is shown below. So they asked a bunch of people. So they asked a bunch of white people, a bunch of blacks, a bunch of Hispanics, and then a bunch of others. So people from other races. And for example, the first white person lives 15 miles from the nearest public library, whereas the third black person lives 6 miles, the second other person lives 11, etc. Okay. I do want to let you know that in the real world, this isn't going to work. Okay. What's the big issue with this study just by looking at it? Hopefully you all know. Because by now in the class, you should know what the problem is. Why this is not a good study.
It's not big enough. There's not enough samples.
Yeah. Well, it's not enough samples, not enough items per sample. Not enough data, right? There's 4 samples, white, black, Hispanic, and other. That's fine. But you don't have a large enough sample size for each of the samples. That's probably what you meant. Am I right?
Yeah.
So it's the sample sizes are not large. So you should always worry about that. Okay, so let's take a look. Part A is, what assumptions must you make in order to perform an ANOVA test? Do we need to assume the distributions are normal? What do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, in fact, all of them. So let's just note the sample sizes are 6, 4, 6, and 4, which are all smaller than 31. So we must assume that the distribution are normal for each of the races. Okay, if you want the distributions of distance from the library. Any questions on the first one? On the first thing that we have to make an assumption of? Okay, do we need to assume the standard deviations are all the same?
Yes.
Yeah. There is no reason to believe that standard deviations are the same, which means we assume. And I hope by now you know that the word assume means that you really shouldn't even be doing the test because you're just probably wrong. So we need to assume the standard deviations are all normal. Are all the same, are all equal for the 4 races. Any questions? Any questions on that assumption? Okay, so that was the next one. And again, you can go and look at all of them. So how about simple random sampling, no bias? Do we need to assume that there's a simple random sampling was done, or there's no bias in the study.
Yes.
Yeah, you do, because nowhere in the sentence does it say that it was done in any special way. Okay, so they might have used convenience sampling. So we're just going to assume they didn't. So we must assume that the sampling technique eliminated bias, which is hard to do. Not always completely impossible to eliminate. Basically, most bias is all that really matters, but it is difficult. It takes work. Okay, now if we go look some more. How about independent? Do we need to assume that the study was independent? What do you think?
No.
Okay, how come no?
Because the samples are independent.
Okay, so this is a tough one. So probably not, but no information is given about the way this is done. Do you see that?
Oh.
So we need to assume the samples are independent, but it is most likely the case that they are independent. Okay, it's pretty hard to make a dependent study with this particular study. Okay, there isn't like some kind of pairing that would go on or anything like that. Okay, so they're probably independent. That's probably not an issue. Okay, and then finally, the samples were consistently taken. And again, it doesn't say anything about it, so we need to assume that the samples were consistently taken. Okay, so the study was conducted in the same way for each of the races. Any questions on that? Okay, so those assumptions all need to be made because nothing in the paragraph or the sentence said that the researcher dealt with it. Any questions at all on part A? All right, so part B, show all the details of the ANOVA test and state your conclusion in the context of the study. All right, so once we've decided we got to use ANOVA, which is obvious because it says do ANOVA, what's the next step? At this point, you should all know the next step when you run the hypothesis test.
Use the calculator.
We're not quite ready yet. We're not quite ready. That will be a step, but not the next step.
Write the hypothesis.
Yeah, write H naught. Okay, that's all. H naught and H1 always have to be written before you use a calculator. So we're going to go H naught, colon. And now we're looking at the means. So we're going to have a mu sub W for white equals mu sub B for black equals mu sub H. Uh-oh. Something happened. There we go. Sub H for Hispanic equals mu sub, just one more time, sub O for other. And then H1 is, we're going to say at least 2 of the population mean distances from the nearest public library differ by race. Okay, another way of saying it is we'll say race is a factor in the distance people live from the nearest public library. So often you'll see it written as that way, and we kind of saw that with test for independence. They often use factor, okay, or test for homogeneity too, but test for independence especially. Any questions at all on H0 and H1?
For the alternative hypothesis, on an exam, we could write either one of those sentences.
Yeah, I'll be okay with either one. But I need to write both because they're both written in literature. So I like to show you both ways. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. But I do want to let you know, this is very unique to this chapter, to ANOVA, is that H0 is symbols, no words, and H1 are all words, no symbols. Okay, it turns out there is a way of writing it with symbols for H1. And I used to teach it that way. And it was so complicated that no one would ever get it right. So I gave up. So it's a lot easier to do with words. Okay, so sometimes you got to give up, especially in elementary stats class. So there is a way, but it's really rough. Okay, and by my definition of rough is that most people, almost no one gets it. So instead, I'm writing it this way. Okay, so just a note, good. Any excuse to review for the final is a good excuse. And that is that when you did chapter 9, it was all symbols. Did chapter 10, all symbols. You did chapter 11, it was all words. Do chapter 12, it was all symbols. And now chapter 13, H0 was symbols and H1 and words. So it's a lot to, kind of get down. But again, you can put in examples and stuff on your note sheet. Any questions on H0 and H1? All right, now what's the next step?
Go to the calculator.
Yeah, go to the calculator. And just to save a little time, I'm going to scroll down so I can get to it. So let's go to the calculator. And by the way, where are we in the class? What calculator number do you think it is?
The last one.
It's the last one. This is the last statistical analysis we're doing in the course. And that is ANOVA. Okay. And if you read through, we've done them all. So in a way, this class has 25 things, right? Okay. And number 25 is ANOVA, analysis of variance. All right, so we need data 1, data 2, data 3, data 4, etc., separated by commas. So 15, 4, 11. 932. And then data 2 was 12166. And then data 3, 9175. $14.71. And then data 4, 18.11.28. Any questions on entering the data in? Okay, then we go ahead and I calculate. And I want to note something. This is new. So F is the test statistic. We're using what's called an F distribution. Okay, and we've already seen a lot of distributions, and this is the last one of the class because it's the last test we're doing, and that is F. 0.33 is good enough for me. So the test statistic is 0.33, and the p-value was equal to 0.8. All right, so you should all know the conclusion at this point. So how do we conclude?
Fail to reject the null hypothesis.
So what does that mean?
Statistically insignificant data to show
Significant evidence to show that. And the nice thing is, all I have to do is copy and paste. And I can copy and paste either pieces, either that one or race as a factor. It really doesn't matter because they mean the same thing. But let's make that at, make it lowercase. At least 2 of the population mean distances from the nearest public library differ by race. Okay, here's what it doesn't tell us. One thing is, does that mean that they're all the same?
No.
No, and that's something very important. Okay, that because it's come up over and over again, so I can't say it too many times, is that when you fail to reject the null hypothesis, it just means you don't know anything. You can't say I know something. It could be that the population is a couple of the population mean distances from the library are differ by race, or it could mean our sample size was just too small. So maybe they do, maybe they don't, but if the sample size is too small, then maybe they do, and our sample size is too small, we weren't able to show it. Okay, or maybe they're all the same. We really don't know any of it. Okay, by the way, had we gotten a p-value of, let's say, 0.008, then you reject the null hypothesis. Could you then go and look at the means and decide which ones are different? What do you think?
No.
Okay, and the answer is you can't, but I can. What do I mean by that?
It requires more advanced statistics.
Exactly. So if you're like me and you've taken 7 statistics classes or something, I've taken a lot of them, then yeah, there are definitely tests you can use, but you're not learning it in this class. Got it? So in this class, all you're able to do is show that they're not all the same. That at least two of them are different from each other, right? Or you're not able to show anything. But if you go on and take another statistics class, then you'll use something called Tukey analysis, and you'll be able to, or Tukey is one of them. There's a few different tests, and you'll be able to actually look at them individually and decide which ones are different. But we don't do that in this class. But I do like to tell you, just because we don't do it doesn't mean it can't be done. Okay, it just means that you have farther to go in stats if you're going to be doing some kind of major study. Okay, and some of you aren't even going to take the class, and you're still going to have to do the major study, because you might be getting a master's, and then all of a sudden you got to do some kind of study like this, and you got to get more involved, and you're going to have to research it by yourself, and figure it out, look it up, and get help or whatever. Okay, and then some of you will take another stats class, and some of you will never really need to use anything in the above this level of detail. But I do always like to let you know that there are more statistics than just what we've done. Okay, we've done elementary stats, and in particular, we have done, I would say, the most important, most used statistics that happen, but that doesn't mean we've done all statistics. Any questions at all about ANOVA? Okay, if there's no questions about ANOVA, I do want to make sure that we have time to talk about the exam, maybe even do an example or two, because that's coming up. But before I do that, any guess on what I'm about to do?
The secret word.
Yeah, and this is the very last secret word of the entire class. And the secret word is thank you. Because I want to thank you for those who are here for your patience, and the fact that you're not screaming and yelling at me all the time, and making it work. So secret word of thank you. And I will let you know that we have now covered everything that there is to cover in the elementary statistics class. You've had ANOVA was the last bit. Okay, and it is important, ANOVA. So we are done with all new material for Math 201 or elementary statistics. Okay, and hopefully you feel like it was useful instead of just something that you're required to take and you'll never use it again. But I like teaching this class because I think it's the most useful class there is in all the classes I teach. Okay, maybe you don't agree, but I think so. It really can be used in many, many, many places in every discipline. So that is it for the new material. Any questions? All right, so let me give you a bit of the calendar. So what is due on Thursday?
Discussion post.
Yeah, the discussion post. And I'm going to let you know that if you don't get a 10 out of 10 on this discussion assignment, it just means that you don't know how to do things on time. Okay, this is an easy one. I promise you, it's an easy one. Okay, it's the easiest of all. Do not procrastinate this one, because pretty much the only way you're going to lose points is if you do it late or don't do it. So make sure you get that discussion post done. And it's the only one since the first week, actually, that you are allowed to and encouraged to reply to more than one of your classmates. Okay, and you'll understand when you get there why that's okay. But you have to do at least one. But you're allowed to reply to more than one of your classmates. Okay, so make sure you read the instructions of the discussion post and then do it. So again, I try to make the discussion post easy when there's something big coming up. Okay, so let you know that after the discussion post on Thursday, then you have a few things, your typical things you have to do besides, after posting, and that is reply on the discussion post. You got to do that. And you're going to have the chapter 13 exercises. I think that might be the shortest assignment of the course. the chapter 13, because I don't want you to spend all your time just focusing on chapter 13. I want you to review for the whole course. There's a lot of work to do, but not a lot of work for new material. 13 is pretty easy. I think you'll agree when you get there. Then there's a secret word quiz, which you should all do in a minute. Okay, that should be simple. Okay, and then after you do the week 11 assignments, what's the very last thing you have of the entire quarter?
Final exam.
Yeah, final exam. And unlike all the other assignments I just mentioned, this is the big one and a hard one. Okay, a lot of work to get ready for it because it's comprehensive. So let me pop into the syllabus. And I want to remind you about the final exam. The first thing is you have 3 choices for taking the final exam. Okay, but it's not going to be the same days of the week as you had for the 2 regular exams, because the final is quite different in that it needs to be done by midweek so that I can grade and send the grades in. Okay, waiting until the following Sunday doesn't work, because then I won't have your grades in time, and that's important. You need to have grades, right? You want to have them on your transcripts. So the final exam can be taken on the 20th of June, the 22nd of June, or the 23rd of June. Okay, so that's a Sunday, a Tuesday, or a Wednesday. Any questions on that? Okay, so let me show you kind of timing. If you scroll down to the bottom, although it's probably going to look a little different than what you're going to see because I'm the instructor. So you'll see that on Sunday, the final exam is due at 10, which means it starts at 8 in the morning. And then you have till 10. Any questions on that? Or if you choose, you can take it on Tuesday. And that's due at 5, which means it starts at 3. And you have 2 hours to do the final exam. It ends at 5. Okay, or it starts, you don't look at the bottom line because that's not you. It starts on Wednesday at 6 p.m. And then you start at 6 and you finish by 8. Okay, so that's the timing. I may not be around Sunday morning. I'm not sure. There's a chance I'll be there at 8 in the morning. I'm definitely not going to be there for the whole time. But I might be going, I have company coming, you know how that is. So I'll do my best to be there at 8. I won't be there till 10 for sure. But there's a chance I'll be there at the very beginning, just in case there's any issues. But I'm not gonna be there for the whole time. Okay. Any questions on the timing of the final exam? Any questions? Okay, so the final exam, again, after Wednesday, if you haven't taken it, you didn't take it. There is no late. Okay, it's then it's a 0, and that's bad. So it's very important you get that final exam taken. And I will let you know that the procedure and process of the final exam is exactly the same as it was for the first 2 exams. So if your computer worked last time and you do exactly the same thing and you don't have a different computer, then it should work this time. Okay, so that's something to note. So again, you know, it should work for you. And that's why hopefully I don't have to be there, you know, every minute, because at this point, this is your 3rd time doing Proctorio. And hopefully you're used to it. Any questions on that? Okay, so it's just another 2-hour Proctorio test. Okay, and if all things in the world go well, this will be the last time I ever have to say you have to do it with Proctorio. You know why?
because classes are going back to face.
Yeah, well, actually, I'll still teach online, but the libraries will be open. It's really all about the libraries. What I do in a normal online class is I have you guys go to our college library or your local library and take it there. But I can't do that because our college library is closed for proctoring. It doesn't do proctoring. I asked. So sorry about that. You can't get angry at me for COVID. I'm vaccinated, so I'm doing my best. Hopefully you're all vaccinated too, but that's the only thing we can do. So sorry about that. We're in that weird time, but then should be over. In fact, today is a big day. You know about today, right? In California, at least, if you're in California. Do you guys know what happened today?
California is open, supposedly.
Yeah, California opened up today, but not the college. Not the college for proctoring. Sorry. I tried. Okay. But at least the rest of California, everything else is open except schools and colleges. But other than that, you can go out and go to the grocery without a mask, I think you're allowed to do that now. So again, the reason why we're doing proctoria has nothing to do with me being mean. It's just because we can't do a proctor test other than, that way. Any questions at all on the procedures and the process for the final exam? Okay, so the final exam is cumulative. What does that mean?
Covers the entire course.
Yeah. It means I'm going to put it in a little more specifics. Anything we have done in the course is fair game. Okay. If it truly covered the entire course, it'd be way too long. You'd never finish in 2 hours. We've done way too much stuff. But anything that we've done in the course is fair game. So, anything could be there. And I can't ask everything because it would be way too long. I can't do that in 2 hours. But let me go back and at least talked about the structure of the final, at least somewhat. I can't go into as much detail as I did for the regular exams because I can't tell you that this is on and this isn't, because I do want you to, show that you've learned the whole course. But I will let you know question number 1, word for word, because it's the same question number 1 that you've had for the other 2 exams. And that is basically that you're not cheating. Okay, you're going to be not to communicate with any adult. Okay, and not use any other devices or materials for this exam that have not already been expressly allowed by your instructor. So that's the same. Sign your name to say you're not cheating, basically. Okay, and then let me go through the rest of exam in very vagueness. The next is there's going to be 6 questions where you're going to be asked to classify the statistical test or confidence interval. So what'll happen is I'll give you a paragraph about what a researcher might be interested in doing, and you have to say which of the tests you're doing or which of the confidence intervals you're using. Any questions on the idea of what those are? Okay, in a way, I put that as the first question because I think it's the most important, because if you can't do that, then you've pretty much wasted your time doing this class, because I don't expect you to know every little tiny minor detail in 6 months from this class, because you can always go look it up and grab the detail. But if you don't know what kind of test to use, then you're gonna have to relearn the whole class just to do a test or something. So that's a big deal.
What do you mean by statistical test? Do you mean like the chi test or?
Yeah, let me show you. Although they're not all titled exactly the same way, but so it could be a hypothesis test for a mean with statistics. Could be a confidence interval for a mean. Do you see that? It could be a hypothesis test for 2 independent samples. Does that make sense?
Okay.
It could be a goodness of fit test. It could be ANOVA. Do you see all these tests that we've had?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give you a paragraph, and you're going to have to click which one to do. Okay, you're not going to have to do the test. Just going to click which one. So basically, how do you start? Because the first step in any statistical test or confidence interval is to decide what you're going to have to do. Second step is to do it. Any questions on that? Okay, and I'll show you what they look like. Okay, true, false. You've seen true, false questions on the other exams. So you're going to have 8 of those. And I do want to let you know that they're only all these first 14 questions are like a few points each. And the last 7, I think, are 15 points each. So just let you know that don't spend all your time on the first 14, run out of time and not do the last 7, or you will fail badly. Okay. Again, the first 14 should go quickly, and then you're going to spend much more time on the last ones. And the last ones, let me make this a little bigger, it'd be easier to see. The last ones are full-length questions, including from each of chapters 10, 11, 12, 13. So notice 10, 11, 12, 13. There's 4 of those, right? So like half or so of these last 7 are new stuff. And the other half is the older stuff. Any questions on that? So it is weighted more for chapters 10, 11, 12, 13 than it is for chapters 1 through 9. Okay, it doesn't mean there aren't stuff from chapters 1 through 9, but if you don't know 10, 11, 13, it'll be a disaster for you. If you don't know some of the 1 through 9, you probably won't get an A, but at least you won't lose everything. Any questions at all on what the final is going to look like?
Would you happen to have a practice sheet or key, practice
I do have a
for
practice
the final?
test. The only problem with the practice test is it's a practice test, not a review sheet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I would be interested in seeing what the questions would look like for 10, 11, 12, and 13.
Yeah. And I don't know if they're all in there in the practice test, because if I made the practice test kind of a length of, of a test, but because remember, chapter 11 has 3 different tests, for example, and I'm not going to add, and you're not going to get all 3 of them. I'm not going to tell you which one you're getting. Do you see that? Chapter 10 also has 3 different tests, and you're not getting all 3 of those either. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So be careful about using the practice test as a study guide. Okay, it's just so you can practice some problems, and I'll show you, lots of problems. Again, we still have some time, but I want to start out with these guys first, and that's the 6 questions to classify the statistical test or interval. I want to show you what your best suggestion is for studying for them. So now, if we go back to the Canvas page, you go home. Oh, wait, sorry. Wrong click. That one. There we go. Just threw you at calculus. This one. And we go to the bottom, comprehensive final. There's a lot of different stuff you can practice. So let me start out with the review applets, because it's kind of what you want to see, practice stuff. Okay, there are practice finals and stuff, but I want to show you a little more in depth than just a practice final. And if I click on that guy, then you'll see it says practice classifying statistics problems. Do you see that one?
Yes.
Okay. By the way, this site is used by millions of students. I'm not kidding. Okay. It's my big site. Like, seems like every AP class, every AP stats class in the country links to it. And I didn't plan on that. They all decided they liked it. Which do you think we need to include? Which do you think we want to work on?
All of them.
Exactly, all of them. So I recommend hitting select all and then hit submit. Okay. And now you have to do the question. So have transportation habits changed since gas prices became expensive? 378 people were asked how they traveled to work 3 years ago, and 428 were asked how they travel to work now. Okay. So let's see if you can tell me what the answer is. Which test or confidence interval would you use? You can say it or put it in the chat box.
Is it a hypothesis test for the difference between two proportions?
Okay, let's try it. So I'm going to click on hypothesis test for the difference in two proportions. And I click on it. And the most important thing is to read what it says. Don't just like see the sad face and know you blew it. Instead, there's a little AI built into this, and it'll see what you did, kind of guess what your mind was thinking wrong, and help you lead your way to the right thing. So it says, what test compares two distributions, right? Notice these are not yes, no questions. Okay, you're not asking them, did you travel to work? It's how did you travel to work? Okay, for example, I could have been the only one in the country that traveled to work. Last time I went to teach this class face to face for my class. Any guess on how I traveled to work? The hint is I might have been it for all of America.
You were at home?
No, that wasn't face to face. I was on skis. Okay, it's been a long time because we've been at home for too long. Yeah, and the last time I traveled to work, my transportation was on skis, where someone else might have been by car, someone else might have been by bike. Does that make sense? And what we want to do is want to say, are the distributions the same? Okay, so now that you've been getting that hint about comparing two distributions, which test do you think it is?
I feel like it's one of the chi-square tests, but I can't remember distribution. So I'm gonna guess independence, chi-square test for independence.
Okay, let's click independence. Okay, notice that we're seeing if the distributions are the same, not if the variables were independent. Do you see that?
Okay, then I guess the goodness of fit.
Okay, let's try goodness of fit. Okay,
Oh no.
we don't have a known distribution, right? We are comparing two distributions and only one have the sample data of each.
Okay, so it's okay. The chi-square test for homogeneity.
Exactly, homogeneity. Now we got the little happy face, by the way. Good thing. Okay, so here's the thing. The worst thing you can do is to get it right because you guessed and then move on thinking you must know it because you got it right, instead of you got it right because you knew it. Does that make sense? And the next worst thing is you get it wrong and you just randomly click something else without even reading the thing to find out what went wrong. So make sure that when you go through these, read what it says, help it guide you to the right way, and get it right. How many of these do you think you should do before you're ready for problems 1 through 6 on the exam? I think it'll call 2 through 6 because 2 through 7, because I think 1 is sign your name. How many do you think you should do? Any thoughts?
Enough that you feel comfortable.
Okay. You got the right idea, but I like to say instead of feel comfortable, because everyone has different feelings, until you start getting them right consistently. Okay, if you get 5 in a row right, you probably got it. Does that make sense? So I recommend keep doing these until you're just getting them right because you got it down. Whereas if you don't practice, it won't go well for you. Any questions on that? And there's hundreds of these that I put in. Okay, literally hundreds. So, you won't do them all probably because that would be wasting your time. It'd be too many. But you'll do a bunch until you start getting them right, and then you know you're ready. Any questions on that?
A little note from students who have used this program in the past,
Mhm.
you know, it's safe to start off with, you know, all the tests, but then if you consistently find yourself like mixing up 2 or 3, you can kind of choose those exclusively just to see, you know, just to get a better handle on those 3 or 2.
Excellent suggestion. Excellent suggestion. Yeah. So again, if you keep confusing, say, independence and homogeneity, you can just click those and see if you can figure those out. Okay, and then you won't have to, then you'll actually focus on just those. So that's a really good idea. Okay, any questions on this particular app that I wrote? Okay, there is also, and there's a lot of ways of the true falses. There's a practice true false questions. And again, we can select all on this one. So decide whether the following is true or false. A one-way ANOVA is performed to see if income is dependent on race. Then the distribution of income for each must follow a normal distribution. True or false?
True.
Okay, let's click true. True. Okay, normality is a requirement for two-way. Whoops, there's a typo there. It should say one-way ANOVA. Unfortunately, I can't fix typos without coming to the college. Okay, so that one is true. Okay, I'm not going to go through all true falses, but there's hundreds of these also. There's other places you can practice true falses. Where are they?
The homework assignments.
Yeah, the assignments, and the assignments should all be open for you. So you can, you know, go back and do those in what's called review mode, which means you get to practice more. Any questions at all on these applets that I wrote? Okay, let's look at some more stuff that's there for you. Because you were asking, you know, where can you practice? All right, so there's a next piece, which is a large collection of past problems. But I want to give you a warning about this. This could be overwhelming. It's very long. I've been teaching this class for a long time, and I think it was like 8 years ago. I collected all the problems that I ever written for any quiz or exam and popped them in a Google site. And it's, I think, a couple hundred pages of problems. So this gives you lots of example problems. Not pages of problems, a couple hundred problems. And I'm not going to go through them all because they go on and on and on.
Does that include the keys, the answers?
This one doesn't. Okay. So they're practice problems. They're not there. And it's actually good to practice problems without a key too. You want to do a mix, because do you think you're going to have a key when you take the test?
No.
Yeah, no. So it's good to practice what it's going to be like when you take the test. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, if there's a key, it's very tempting to look at the key if you get a little stuck instead of just try it. And with the final exam, you just got to try it. Okay, there is no key. You can't do that. So this is a more of a realistic practice. Any questions on that? Whereas the homework exercises, those all have keys. Okay, this goes on and on. It's got 188 pages of questions. So there's no way you'll have time to do every one of them. But again, has a lot. Okay, so that's another collection of stuff that can help. Okay, then there is a practice funnel. And let's click on it. So there's a practice funnel, and this one does have a key. So again, I want to make sure that you have what you need. So you have one with a key, you have problems without a key, you have these app type problems, but there's definitely lots and lots of problems. So this is a sample. It's a final exam I gave a long time ago. Okay. So this is a, written final exam from days when we were on campus. Any questions at all on kind of resources? Okay, and again, as you're thinking about questions, you can go to any chapter. Let's say you wanted to, I don't know, practice things on the expected value because you don't remember that stuff. Okay, so then you can go ahead and go to chapter 3, and you can go to the content, the assignments. You can go to the chapter 4. And then yours won't say student preview. Just practice. And then you can go work on these problems. And you go to any of the questions. So I don't know, pop in number 9 or something. And there's an example question. So that would be binomial. Okay. If you want expected value, it's probably, let's try 7. Oh. There we go. There's an expected value problem. So again, there are plenty of practice problems to work on. There's no question that you can, spend more hours than there are hours between now and you take the exam doing more problems. That's not an issue. Any questions at all? Okay. The other thing you can do, I want to mention, is that I have my office hours. My office hours will be at the regular times until next Wednesday. So I have office hours tonight, 6 o'clock to 7, and tomorrow from 10 to 11:10, and then Tuesday at 7, Thursday at 7, and then 6 to 7, and then Friday 10 to 11:10, and then next Monday I'll have office hours 10 to 11:10, and Tuesday from 6 to 7, Wednesday from 10 to 11:10. After the class is over, I don't have office hours because the class is over. So after next Wednesday will be my last office hours. But then Braulio has hours too. Braulio, you want to mention when you'll be around between now and next Wednesday?
Yeah, my schedule roughly stays the same, but let me take a look. So Monday and Wednesday, I'm still, well, what day is it? Tuesday? So Monday and Wednesday are still 3 to 4. Tuesday, I'll be on all day. I know, like I kind of like made some room because of class, but I'll be on from 11 until pretty much the entire day. Starting at 11, and then Thursday. Thursday is from 9 a.m. to 1:30 p.m.
Okay, so there's lots of help, by the way. So definitely, and what you should do is, again, practice problems. And then if there's something you don't understand, that's when you come talk to me or Braulio, and we'll help you through it. Okay, so again, what I recommend is practice problems, and then keep a little notebook where you write down problems that you couldn't figure out or didn't understand, or questions you had, and then come to us and ask. Does that make sense? Okay, because we are around for you. I do want to let you know another big thing that a lot of people think they can do and they can't. After you have taken the final exam, the course is over. Okay. Do not send me an email saying, can I get extra credit to do, to improve? The course is over after the final exam. That's it. So just a note, there isn't going to be extra work after the course is over. The course is over. I'm going to grade your exam, submit the grades, and that's it. So that's just a note. Oh, good. Braulio will put in the chat box, in case you didn't notice, the times that he's around, which are a lot of hours, by the way. So again, you're there. And there's some other tutors too. Braulio's the best because he's the one that actually watches this class and specifically. But there are a few other tutors too. Any questions?
And then for the final, we can have a paper, two-sided paper for as a key.
Yeah. So let me
review that.
Yep. So let me remind you. Let's go to the syllabus, which is kind of like a contract. That was, I think I went too far. There we go. Exam policy. So it says that for the regular exams and a 8.5 by 11, 8.5 by 11 note sheet may be used for the final. Okay. And it says both sides can be written. So that's a lot of real estate, by the way. Okay. A full piece of paper, front and back, you could put a lot on it. And I do recommend you put a lot on it. Okay. But here's something I recommend doing is I recommend starting working on that right away. And then while you're practicing problems, use it. And then if you realize there's some kind of formula or some little hint that you need, put it on that page. So in other words, keep real estate open so that as you're doing problems, you add to that paper on the both sides. And then by the time you take the final, you'll have it all there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So use it as you're practicing. Don't wait till the very end to start writing your note card, okay, because your note sheet. Because then one thing is you'll have a lot of trouble finding things if you're not used to reading it. Because the hope is you're gonna have a lot of stuff on it. But if you've been practicing with it for a week, then you'll know exactly where all the pieces are. You'll know how to navigate through your own paper. Does that make sense as a suggestion?
Yes.
Okay, but good questions. Yeah, you definitely get the note card and definitely want it. We do have some formulas in the class, not a huge amount. Okay, not like some other math classes, but it's probably 10 or 11 formulas, something like that, where you got to use it. Definitely formulas from chapter 7. That was essential limit theorem. Okay, whether you have, NP and NQ greater than 5, or sigma over root n, or n mu. There were a whole lot of formulas. I'm not sure if you remember them all. There were formulas for sample size, for confidence interval, formula for z-score. There's been a bunch. And what you might want to do is start with your note cards and then add to them. Okay. We haven't had too many formulas recently, have we? In the last few chapters.
No.
Yeah, there's not too many formulas, but again, you can use template stuff to get used to how you answer a question. Like how do you explain what r squared is? And you can kind of have an example. You can put that on your paper. Here's another big note, something you should focus through most of the final exam, is that make sure that you use the language of statistics we've been using. So for example, if you're writing the conclusion of a hypothesis test, make sure you refer to the population mean or population proportion if that's what's involved, and don't get them mixed up. Don't forget the word population if you are referring to the population, or sample if you're referring to the sample, because those are things that are required and points are lost if you don't put those in. Does that make sense? Okay, and that's happened for your other stuff that you've had to do, including your discussion posts and your first 2 exams. Any questions on that idea? Another big piece that you can practice and also see wordings of stuff, there's a bunch. And so another one you can do is you can go to the discussion boards. And let's say you wanted to practice something from chapter 10. Oh, sorry, how about chapter 9? Then you can click the hypothesis test discussion board and you can read a full analysis. You can read my full analysis on how the wording is supposed to look. Okay, and it gets long, it's a lot of typing. Okay, any questions on that idea? So again, you can get kind of templates, guidelines of what things look like. And see, I recommend going back to your discussion posts. And you can look at yours and see where you went right and wrong too, because that helps too, to remind you not to make the same mistake again. Any questions on that? Okay. And then finally, I want to remind you the last piece of or last resource, main resource, or last bunch of resources are going to be videos. So there's a lot of videos. So for example, there's the with LibreText calculator. I don't have the first couple chapters in LibreText. Sorry about that. But I got all the others. I got the main chapters. So. And then you can go through and this gives you more examples. So let's say you want to do chapter 10. So that would be hypothesis test with 2 samples. And if you click on that in prior chapters. So here's what I recommend doing. For 2, just a second, is recommend going to an example. He owned an American car. Pause it, read the question, try to answer it, and then watch me do it for a couple minutes and see if you got it right. Does that make sense? So that's another nice resource on practicing, is that you can use these examples that I put in. And I have these on the YouTube. These are the long videos. I also have the short, let's see, those are the videos of worked out examples, LibreText calculator. And you can practice some of these. So I don't know, finding a binomial probability. Of the US population. And I recommend pausing it, reading the question, see if you can answer it, and then watch me do it for a couple minutes. See if you got it right. So that's a recommendation on kind of ways of practicing. These are all problems I wrote because I made the videos. Any questions on that? So one of the things, whether you like it or not, I have a lot of resources because I've been teaching this class for many years. And every year I try to do one new focus to add a resource. Like this year was all about the LibreText videos. I don't know if you realize that, but that's the new stuff. Okay, so each year I do other things. Okay, whereas the year before was to take the book and to get it all interactive. And I'll see what I'm going to do next year. Any questions at all? Any questions? Any questions about anything? Okay, if there aren't any questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the share, stop the recording. We'll call it a class. Actually, this will be the very last time you see me in a webinar, unless you decide to. Well, that's really the last time. Okay, so this is the last time you'll see me in a webinar. I'll be around if you post on the Q&A discussion board. I'll be happy to answer questions. If you come to my office hours, I'll help you out. Until next Wednesday, by the way. I'll be around Thursday, Friday, but the course is over. And then I'm backpacking for days. So good luck finding me. Going to beautiful places. But I'm here to help you out until the final exam. So I'm going to stop the recording.